Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to our class today. This is Eat Like the French. It's a nutrition class with Judy Palken, a registered dietitian. Today, we're going to talk about how those French women can eat all those croissants and stay slim and healthy, and the French men, of course. So today, we're going to learn about the habits of the French that have to do with many things, including the timing of meals, portion sizes, and attitude. Judy is a registered dietitian who provides information and guidance to help you make effective and helpful dietary choices. And this project has been funded in part with federal funds from the National Library of Medicine. Again, we are recording today. If you have any questions, type them in the chat box. And later in our presentation, I will post some links in the chat box as well. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Judy.
Thank you so much, Devin, for that very nice welcome. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you're here, and I so much appreciate that the Worcester Public Library keeps all kinds of classes going at such a difficult time. It's really wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can you see that? Do you see a slide? Okay. So welcome to Eat Like the French. And I guess the question is, why would we want to eat like the French? What is it about the way they eat? So we're going to spend this class exploring that, but suffice it to say for now that there really does seem to be a French way of eating that's compatible with living a good and happy and healthy life. It's about the food somewhat, but it's also even more about the manner of eating and attitudes about eating, which are really important. So I want to share with you what I've learned about it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it too, if you want to share them. I do welcome any comments or questions. I really have to say that a lot of my good ideas, I think, have come from talking to people like you. I get my ideas from talking to people. So if you have anything you want to add or any questions, or if you happen to set a goal as we're going along and you want to share it, feel free to put that in the chat box. And I feel sure that we'll have time to get to that. And as before, if you've been to my classes, you know that you'll get an email with images of the slides. So if there's anything of a special interest, don't feel that you have to write it down. So some of what I'm going to say is going to come from this book, French Women Don't Get Fat, by Monet Giuliano, and this was published in 2007. And then some of what I'm going to say has come from other sources I've read and just from my own thoughts and observations. So it's kind of a mixed bag. But I do want to give Monet Giuliano some credit because much of what I'm going to say, at least I got the ideas from her. How did that happen? Let's see. The mouse is hypersensitive. Okay. So I want to tell you a little bit about her and her story because it really is interesting. And I've got the book right here. But what she does in the book is she tells her story and how she came to have this wisdom about why French women don't get fat. So I want to tell you a little bit about her and a little bit about that. It's actually a really nice book. I highly recommend it. I bet the Worcester Public Library has it. I'm guessing. Yep. Okay. So she's from France. By the way, these pictures of her, one is on the back cover of the book, so it's probably from about 2007. The other one looks to be much more recent. But she comes from France, and she has spent much of her life in the United States working, and so she travels back and forth between France and the United States. It started for her as, I think she was a senior in high school. She got accepted for a year abroad program. So she came to the US for her final year of high school, and she was actually put in Weston, so not too far from here. And she writes about how kind of blown away she was by the scale of things. She came from a little village in France, and she had never seen such big houses and families that had 3 cars and, lessons and everything for their kids. And apparently also the food was a revelation. She mentions the chocolate chip cookies, and certainly what happened is she gained a lot of weight. She says she gained so much weight that her host mom had to come up with some new clothing for her. And when she got home, she describes how surprised her family was And she didn't lose the weight right away. She was on a trajectory of eating pastries, the way she describes it, and she continued to gain weight. And then she finally lost the weight with the help of, it sounds like she had a very wise mother who set her up with a very compassionate and kind doctor who gave her a lot of good advice. And she managed to lose the weight. So this all benefits us because she tells a good story about it and how she did it. She ended up going back to the United States and worked in different jobs and worked her way up and became the director of champagne for Veuve Clicquot, which is a luxury brand of champagne, and I believe other goods. And she also became a writer, and she's appeared on a lot of talk shows. So if you feel like you've heard of her, she is pretty famous. She's written several books. This just happens to be, I've read a couple. This happens to be my favorite. I find it to be very useful. So her qualifications to write such a book and to talk about nutrition are not that she has any background in healthcare, but she's had a lot of time over the decades to observe the differences in how the French eat and how Americans eat. And that's what she's talking about mostly in the book. She speaks mainly to women, but everything she says and everything I'm going to say can apply to men as well, pretty much. And I should add that not everybody loves her. She's been criticized for perpetuating the stereotype of the French woman who is thin and fashionable and gets everything right. And some people don't like that. Also, I even found that the tone of the book can be a bit braggy. As you can imagine, any book where you're talking about how the French do things better than Americans, it's a bit braggy. But to me, that's part of the fun of the book. I've actually read it more than once. I refer back to it a lot. I actually think there's a lot of good it has to offer. So that's why I want to share it with you, some of her advice. So the question is, how do they do it? How do French women eat all those baguettes and croissants and pastries and chocolate and still remain slender? How do they eat meals consisting of several courses and still remain slender? And by the way, those are real French foods. It's not just the tourists that are over there eating those, although certainly that goes on too. This is a real phenomenon that they eat those foods. So first, I wanted to back up and ask, do they really do it? Are they really thinner? So I tried to look into this online, and I did do a bit of digging, and it was really hard to find any current information. There's a lot of old information going back to the early 2000s talking about the French paradox and how French people have much better cardiovascular health despite a diet that's rich in saturated fat. And there's a lot of old data about how much thinner they are. The most recent thing I could find was from this French journal in 2016. And, it shows that they were looking at adults over 30, percentage of them who are overweight or obese. And it shows that almost 57% of French men are overweight or obese. And for women, the number is close to 41%. So those numbers have climbed. They used to maintain their weight better, but those numbers have climbed. However, they're still lower than our numbers here, significantly lower. So I think we can say that, yes, they do maintain their weight better, although sadly, that seems to be changing. What's happening is the world has gotten smaller, and we, Americans, are part of the problem. We have exported a lot of really bad dietary habits and a lot of fast food restaurants all over the world, and that includes France. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in future years and decades, but for now, that's where we're at. They're still doing better than we are. And it seems to be due to a combination of really good factors that the French have always kind of followed. The way they shop for food, the manner of their meals, their habit of drinking water, their habits and their mindset regarding weight, and this thing they do called compensation that I'm going to tell you about closer to the end of the presentation. So these are all good, and it's a combination of all of these that accounts for their relative success. So I'm going to start with saying a few things about their food shopping. Let me just get these images out of the way 1 second. Okay, so it's a French habit. It might be a European habit in general to shop often, several times per week. So if you shop that way, what you might do is get what you need for a couple days. Now, one thing good about this is it causes you to think about what you want to eat for the next 2 or 3 days and buy just that food. So you might not buy a bunch of impulse purchases or a bunch of things you don't need because you're not quite sure what you're going to do. They also tend to shop in markets, not giant supermarkets, which again are kind of an American thing. At least they started out that way. Now, so this is really nice advice for normal times. For right now during the pandemic, of course, we're being advised to not be in crowded places with a lot of people. So it's not entirely relevant for right now, but in general, it's really nice advice to shop often. And when we can get back to that, you know, a lot of us where we live now, if you live in the suburbs, especially, you might not have little markets. But I find you can approximate that kind of shopping if you visit farmers markets and farm stands and Middle Eastern shops, and fish markets still do exist, and places like that. If you have the time, if you can do that, you can kind of approximate that nice market shopping. Okay, another French way is to choose fresh fruits and vegetables in season. And this is very nice because it gives some nice predictability and anticipation to the turning of the earth, you know, the traveling of the planet. Um, I like to think of it with peaches. Like if you, like me, love peaches in the summer and you appreciate how juicy they are and how flavorful they are, it's really nice to only have them then, because then you can really look forward to them and they taste better. We can get anything now at any time of year in a large supermarket, but we pay a price in terms of it's not as good. It's had to be picked sometimes before it's ripe and travel a long distance, so it's not as good. You might also think of getting the freshest greens in the summer, and in the winter having more hearty vegetable soups and winter squash. So it's nice to kind of have those rotations with our produce. The French also seek out really good ingredients. And I've looked at a lot of French recipes, and it seems like certain ingredients are really indispensable. And of course, there must be many others, but I see that a lot of their simple recipes call for lemons, berries of all kinds, fresh herbs. There's a real emphasis on using herbs, mushrooms, and good cheese. They really like that good cheese. So, you know, going back to shopping often with the foods like the berries and the herbs and the mushrooms, you really have to shop often because foods like that don't keep long, even in your refrigerator. I talked to someone recently who told me, oh no, she always only shops every 2 weeks. And while that can be done, you're certainly not going to be getting this delicate produce that goes bad quickly. To do that, you usually have to shop more often. It's also really nice to be open to trying new flavors and new ingredients. So it might be that you try some new herb that you've never tried, a different vegetable. Maybe you come across some grain or grains you haven't tried. Maybe you've never tried quinoa or millet, and to try things in different combinations. So I want to suggest, for example, if you haven't used cilantro much, it's just the most wonderful herb. And I also want to suggest something I've recently started playing around with, and that is fennel. And maybe you're very familiar with them, with fennel, but I wasn't. But I just tried this shaved fennel salad that I found on simplyrecipes.com. So I'm giving you the recipe. It was so simple and so incredibly delicious. I do not have a mandolin. I just sliced the fennel really thin. And I'll be honest, I was plumb out of fresh thyme leaves and fresh parsley, meaning I just didn't buy them. But I used dried, and it was really delicious. So we can improvise, adjust, and still make some great new dishes. Part of, appreciating fresh produce is just noticing its visual appeal. I love this Matisse, the red onions. And one thing I love about it is, even though they're just red onions, look how each one is a slightly different color. And that's how food is and how it should be. And we should appreciate how it looks before we even cut up those onions.
Judy, may I ask a question?
Of course.
So you mentioned fennel, which I don't think I've eaten.
Mhm.
Is the texture kind of like water chestnuts, or what's it like?
No, I wouldn't say so, although anybody can chime in. We're a small group, and please feel free if you want to chime in. I found it to be more like celery root, um, or maybe celery itself, I want to say. More like celery itself down at the bottom. When I sliced it thin, that's kind of the level of resistance I'm at. And it's got that anise flavoring and aroma like licorice.
Okay.
So what
Thank you.
I did with it, I should tell you, what I did with it is I served it on a bed of arugula. I love arugula. I have a lot of that around these days. So I made this fennel salad. It doesn't make a lot because a bulb of fennel is a small thing, at least the one I bought. And I served it on arugula, and it just felt very special. But it was very easy, so I like that.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Sure. If anybody tries it, let me know. So I'm going to move on from shopping and talk about the manner of meals. This is very French and very important. And I'm sure a lot of Americans do this too, but perhaps not enough. So it's traditional to have 3 really good meals per day. And by really good, I mean tasting good, so you're happy and satisfied, and substantial. At the same time every day. It's very common, apparently, in France to have set meal times. So none of this like one day we're having dinner at 6 and the next day we're having it at 8:30. Apparently, no. Multiple courses. 3-course meals are common or more. Sometimes there's a little cheese course. There's very often a dessert course. But they use small plates and they have small portions. More about that coming. Here right now, portion control. Portion control is really, really important for the French. I'm speculating that a lot of them don't even think of it as portion control, because if you're brought up that way with small portions, what we would consider to be small portions, you might not even think of them as being small. But apparently it's not uncommon to go out to a cafe and order a sandwich, and it shows up on one slice of bread with cheese and ham and greens and whatever else. Now contrast that to our club sandwiches, that you see in the US. And I'm thinking about the foot-long subs at Subway. Who actually needs that? Small desserts are common. And there are definitely large desserts too. I've seen them, like in Paris in the bakeries. But many times people share those and they have small desserts. Eating one treat, even if a whole bunch are offered. And I read an anecdote about this. A lady who lived or was visiting, I'm not clear, in France, and she got somehow invited to a birthday party for a child, but the host had put out pastries and coffee for the grown-ups off to the side. So she was having her coffee and she had her pastry, and all the pastries were lined with little papers. And then she wanted to have another pastry, but she looked and she noticed that all the other moms and dads only had one pastry liner on their plate. So in other words, everybody stopped with one. Now, I don't know about you, to me that sounds very hard, But again, it's what you're accustomed to. And if we step back and think, it's better to have one, if it's treat to you, it's better to have one than not to have any. It seems like a nice kind of compromise. So she didn't have the second pastry. This is just a kind of a gourmet kind of portion control. Quenelle refers to when foods are made into this kind of egg-like shape. This originated in Germany, supposedly, but it's done in France. And it started out apparently with like creamed fish dishes. But now it can refer to an ice cream or a sorbet or potatoes or anything made into the shape. But I just like it because there's an inherent portion control built into this. The French don't do very much snacking, at least traditionally. Snacking is viewed as a very American habit. We're just used to it. But again, it's not so much part of their culture. And what I've listed here is many of the very popular American snacks. So pretzels, trail mix, crackers of all kinds, but especially Ritz and saltine are very popular. Those 100-calorie snack packs, chips of all kinds, Teddy Grahams, and Pop-Tarts. And what I noticed is a lot of these have an aura of health about them, undeserved. Like they're not really healthy. I mean, a trail mix can be a healthy thing, especially if you're out hiking. It can be a very nice thing. But, crackers in general aren't healthful. Anytime I see a list of healthy snacks, like in a women's magazine or something, it always includes pretzels. What are pretzels? They're just white flour with salt on them. They're not healthy. So many of us could really benefit by having those 3 good meals and getting away from the snacking thing. More about meals. I mentioned the 3 meals at the set times. The French eat sitting down at the table. They do not stand at the counter and wolf down the first course or something. Raise your hand if you've done that. And I've done it. I've done it too. If you're well, raising your hands, but they don't do that. It's an event, so you sit down at a table. Doesn't matter if you're by yourself. It doesn't matter if your table is a card table. You sit down at the table. They don't eat on the run, walking down the street, driving. We always eat driving, Americans. Sitting in a class, it's just in general not done. Again, those are American things. They use real plates and good napkins, and they eat slowly and savor every bite. This is all sounding really good, I think, really good to me. Good habits. It's really nice, this is just something I think, to have daily rituals. And this picture I'm showing you is from a very old magazine, so hence the crease marks. It was folded for years, but I love what it's showing. Apparently in France in the 1800s and 1900s, hot chocolate was a very common breakfast drink. I don't know if it is anymore. So this shows a really pretty china cup and saucer with a decadent kind of hot chocolate that's got thick chocolate and cream. You could certainly approximate that in a more healthy manner by using low-fat milk and cocoa powder and sweeten it a little if you want. So it doesn't have to be decadent. But what I like here is the idea of it being a daily ritual. I think rituals give us something to look forward to and to hold on to and to anchor everything else we do to it. So your ritual could instead, it could be tea or it could be coffee or something else altogether. But I just thought this was really pretty. And this is a Renoir of the cup of chocolate. So I'm just imagining, this lady with her morning cup of chocolate, just really nice. I think it's also nice to dote on your favorite vegetable. This happens to be arugula. Now, it's really nice if you can eat a wide variety of vegetables. And people like dietitians are always saying you should get a wide variety of produce, all different colors, change it up. And I say that. But sometimes it's challenging, especially now it might be challenging because of the situation we're in. So I want to say, if you're struggling with your vegetable intake, pick a vegetable you really love, and get it often, and then see if you can change it up. Cook it in different ways, or if it's a salad green, you could add different ingredients on different nights. It's really good if you can dote on a vegetable that is dark green. Really good for you. So this is a really pretty dining room. Um, Bright, vivid colors. And I just wanted to make the point that it's really nice if we can all eat in a setting that makes us happy. So who would have a dining room like this? Who would be so bold and brave as to have a dining room like this? Does anyone know? This is Monet's dining room. So now it makes perfect sense. So Monet, you know, of course he's going to be daring and bold and have vivid colors. And you can see this. If you go to France and go to Giverny, which is outside of Paris, you can tour his home and walk through, and you can walk right through this room. And this is how it was and how it is. It's just gorgeous. Just had to show you that. I want to give you a few cooking ideas. Things that might be a little bit different. So many times recipes, even simple recipes, will call for orange juice. It might be like a nice salad dressing that you want to make, a vinaigrette, and it calls for orange juice. It might be that you want to pour a little bit into a stir fry. But let's say you don't have orange juice on hand because you've heard that, gee, drinking juice is just a concentrated source of sugar, so you've kind of gotten away from that morning glass of juice. So what you can do is keep orange juice concentrate in your freezer, and then anytime you happen across something that calls for orange juice, you just spoon out a little. And if you want to mix it with water and make up a cup, I've got the proportions there. But the great thing about it is it never gets so hard that it's like an ice cube. It just stays kind of like a slush, a slurry that you can always scoop some out. I've been doing this for a few years now, and it keeps forever, and it really is nice to have on hand. Or if you just prefer to keep oranges around to squeeze for juice, just know that a medium orange will give you anywhere from about 1/3 to 1/2 of a cup of juice. If you have leftover red wine, you can freeze it in ice cube trays, and you can add it to a red sauce for great flavor and wonderful, healthful phytochemicals. And I read, I haven't tried this one yet, but I read that it's a nice addition to a wine spritzer or seltzer. That sounds so appealing to me. Just to have, you know, seltzer with those bright red cubes in it, gotta try it. And finally, if you're having pasta with sauce, you might want to saute the pasta with some of the sauce together right before you serve it. The pasta will absorb some of the sauce and taste that much better. So these ideas, although they're not French per se, I feel like they're clever and they're frugal. So in that way, they're kind of French. Entertaining. So I read, and who knows, that the French can entertain really, really easily by keeping it simple. Like supposedly you could work all day and then come home and have friends over for dinner by keeping it simple. So the idea is this: you create a dish in one pan, like it could be a lasagna or any kind of casserole. And you know, you might want to do that the evening before, or even, you know, weeks before, and then freeze it. And then you're all set. And you only have to add to that your bread and your wine, and you're all set to entertain. So I want to just amend that to say, I think the bread should be whole wheat, ideally. And it's also nice if there's a little salad to go with that, like even just like 2 ingredients, like some, you know, some baby kale and some cherry tomatoes or something. Not essential, but just nice. But I do like this idea of keeping it simple. I think some of us have fallen into the rut of when we entertain, we feel like it has to get all elaborate, and then we don't want to do it. I think it's really nice to have some kind of a wow dish that you can be known for. So it might be like you have figured out how to make a perfectly baked salmon, that you can bring places. I have a friend that knows how to do this, and it's spectacular. I had an aunt who made the best lemon meringue pie, and she was really good at other desserts and other foods too, but she became known for her lemon meringue pie. And I've known a few people that make a nice vegetable salad and know how to put their own twist on it by adding some weird ingredient or something different. So if you do that, if you have some special dish, it causes you to seem disciplined and organized and like a great cook. Here's another thing the French do, and that's drink lots of water. And that is, as you probably know, a really good habit. So in the book, French Women Don't Get Fat, Giuliano talks about how, she in particular drinks water from morning till evening and all the time in between. She recommends that we start, like even when we're in the bathroom brushing our teeth in the morning, that we drink a big glass of water then. And, at the end of the day, have a big glass of water in the evening. Now, I will add, some people don't want to have a big glass of water in the evening because it just causes them to have to get up even more during the night. So if you feel like that's you, but you do want to get into this good water drinking habit, just skew that to earlier in the day. But a generous, good water intake is really good for health. It just helps our digestion, and it's good for skin health, and it lubricates the joints, and it has so many wonderful effects. And many people don't drink enough water, so I'm really all in favor of this one. She recommends, having the water be at room temperature, or I want to say maybe cool. And the reason for that is just that it goes down so much more easily, and you can drink more than if you're trying to drink a big glass of ice cold water. That can be hard. So regarding weight, many people struggle with their weight, and that's certainly true of some French women too. But according to Giuliano, this is what French women do not do. They don't count calories. I guess you wouldn't see them walking around with a calorie counting book or maybe an app adding up every calorie. They don't weigh themselves, at least too much. And it's not that they're not paying attention, but they gauge their weight, more by how their clothes fit. So think about if you have a favorite pair of pants that you wear all the time, and you notice that it's feeling tight around the waistband, then you've gained weight and you might need to make some adjustments. So it really, when you think of it that way, you don't even need the scale. You can just tell by your favorite clothing. They don't get together and talk about diets. The Atkins diet, the South Beach diet, the whatever diet. Apparently it's not, even if they are following some kind of a regimen, it's felt to be kind of personal. They don't skip meals. They have those 3 good meals, which is, a really good idea. They absolutely do not substitute diet shakes for meals. I don't even know if you find those things in the stores in France. I'm not sure. It would be interesting to know, but here someone will say, well, I've gained weight, so for lunch I'm going to have an Ensure, and that's it, or a Boost or something like that. It's not a good idea, and it's certainly not the French way of eating. And they don't usually have seconds. I'm sure there's got to be exceptions to every rule, but in general, they take what they're going to have, they know what they should have and what they want, and then that's the end of it. I want to back up to that one. I like having seconds. Psychologically, I like having seconds, but I have, and I bet some of you have too, developed this habit of taking small firsts. So I know it's kind of like I've cut the firsts in half, and then I can go back and take more. So it's playing a mind game, but it works. It makes me happy. So just had to share that with you. Apparently, there's a French thing about eating a lot of yogurt. And this is another really good habit for many, many reasons. Apparently, it was customary in France and a lot of cultures to make their own yogurt, but more and more now people are buying yogurt because it's so available. But whichever you do, you can use yogurt to help manage your hunger. Um, and that is because yogurt is high in protein, and high protein foods can help to make us feel satisfied. So what you might want to do is try having 2 or 3 small servings of yogurt per day. Um, and I'm not saying like you have a yogurt, like a container of yogurt with every meal. That would begin to feel very excessive. But if you want to try this, you might want to just have a dollop of yogurt with whatever you're having at your meals. And what that can do again is help to take the edge off of your appetite. I'm encouraging you to use plain yogurt, but you can flavor it up. You can add things like a little honey, a little wheat germ, some fresh fruit, any combination of those. It's also nice to go the savory route, and I like to add scallions and extra virgin olive oil, maybe herbs. Anyway, but the benefits are, aside from taking the edge off your appetite, you can help to fill the protein gap. It's really good for us to get protein at every meal, significant protein, like 20 to 30 grams, and that can be hard to do. Let's say you're having lunch and your protein is some peanut butter that you've spread on a piece of bread. And there's a couple grams of protein in the bread, and you might be getting 8 grams of protein from the peanut butter. You're not coming anywhere near what you should be getting as an adult person at lunchtime. So you can fill the protein gap with yogurt. I've been trying to do that. Another benefit of the yogurt is it's good for bone health because of the calcium in it, and if it's fortified with vitamin D, which it often is. It's also got wonderful probiotics, which are beneficial bacteria that are really good for gut health. So I guess I should ask, Devin, is there any questions or anything in the chat box?
No questions in the chat box
Okay.
yet. But
No problem. No
type
problem at all.
something while I'm talking, I have to say that from one of your previous programs, I started doing plain yogurt with a little bit of honey and blueberries every day for breakfast. It's not a dollop,
Uh-huh.
but it definitely gets me through the day. I used to be more of a snacker in the morning before lunch, and having the yogurt with fruit has made a huge difference. Not just
I love hearing
appetite
that.
wise, but I feel healthier from having it.
Yeah, it truly is one of the most healthful foods. So I love to hear that. And blueberries are so good for us. So you picked a really good combination. And if you're wondering, if you're hearing this and you're wondering, I don't like plain yogurt, you can buy, there are some yogurts now. It used to be kind of all or nothing. It was either plain or it was the fruited ones that are really high in sugar. But now there's some that are kind of in between. They're lower in sugar. Like, for example, Siggy's has some yogurts that are not terribly high in sugar. So there's compromises. But I do have to say, you can do a lot with plain yogurt. There's, we could all come up with different combinations of what we could add to yogurt and make it really appealing. So French women take great pleasure in eating. It's supposed to be a great pleasure. So this is a wonderful painting by Cézanne from somewhere between 1890 and 1895. And I just think like this woman looks like she probably took great pleasure in eating. She's the woman with the coffee pot. And just an aside, she is thought to be probably a member of Cézanne's household staff. Back then, people had a household staff, and he didn't like to use models the way a lot of the other artists did, because apparently he took a long time to paint, and I guess he was shy. So he would either use members of his household staff or family members. So they're not sure who exactly this was, but probably someone working in his home. And it's just a beautiful painting, I think. Anyway, the great pleasure in eating as contrasted with what a lot of us American women do. A lot of what we do is we fall into a pattern of overeating, then we feel guilty, Then we want to feel better again, or we just feel so disgusted with ourselves. But for whatever reason, we overeat again. And we get into this vicious cycle of overeating and feeling guilty. And that can't possibly do us any good. There has to be a way out of this. You will hear women say, and I don't hear so many men saying this, so I think this is more women specific. You'll hear women say, I was so bad. Raise your hand if you've ever said that. I can't see all of you, but yeah, okay. So I've said it too. It's not a moral issue, but it's just something we wish, we wish we didn't have to feel that way. So here's what you can do, some things you can do. If you feel like your weight is an issue, rather than falling into that vicious cycle, you can think about a weight that is good for you. Maybe not something off of like a BMI chart or something, but just a weight that maybe you were comfortable at a year or two ago, something that you can really attain. Remember, if you have a health condition like heart disease or diabetes, even a small weight loss can do a lot of good. So it doesn't have to be a lot. So you think of a weight that's good for you, you record everything you eat on paper, you write it down without changing anything. And then you have a conversation with yourself and you ask yourself, what could I give up or eat less of? And what are the things I truly enjoy and I really don't want to give up? And you'll probably come up with some good ideas. Which leads me to this thing called compensation that Monet talks about in the book, French Women Don't Get Fat. So she says this is what they do. They eat what they want in reasonable portions, always in reasonable portions. And they don't give up their bread, their chocolate, whatever it is that they want. But then they compensate each time by making an adjustment later. So it might be extra walking, it might be skipping something at the next meal, like the drink, the bread, or the dessert. Those would be common ones to skip. So it might look like this. You might say, oh, wow, it was lunch and I just had a big dessert. I don't even usually eat dessert at lunch. Okay, I'm gonna go take a nice walk. Or at dinner, I was gonna have bread, but I'm not gonna have the bread. Now she says that the French woman's life is like this all the time and they don't even think about it. It's just it's a cycle that they do over and over, which could be. And she also says that the pleasure needs to come before the compensation. So in other words, first you have the indulgence and then you compensate later. And psychologically, I can kind of see why that makes sense. So in other words, you don't say, well, I'm going to have a really tiny breakfast because I know I'm going to pig out later. It doesn't work that way. So I think this makes a lot of sense because it allows people to have what they want, but they're constantly adjusting rather than berating themselves. So what I want you to do is think about the food you really love and what's important to you and have a plan. If you want to jot it down, go right ahead, or you might just want to jot it down later, but you might be thinking, I can have this by compensating in this way. And if you think of something and you want to enter it in the chat box, go ahead, but by no means if you don't want to. So again, food is to be enjoyed with others if possible. And I know that's something that's really challenging right now. There certainly are ways we can enjoy food with others now during the pandemic. Maybe you have met people outside for a meal, although that's getting tough with the weather, or there's meals held together over Zoom. This painting, I think more than any other that I've ever seen, really illustrates people just enjoying eating together. So this is one of Renoir's most famous paintings, The Luncheon of the Boating Party. And you can tell that these people have enjoyed nice food and wine, and they're really enjoying each other's company. You can just tell. And I love how the lady on the left, she's holding the little dog. She's enjoying her company with the little dog. Everything about this is just so joyous, I think. So it's kind of like, it's very nice. And by the way, if any of you if you remember the movie Amelie from 2001, the French movie, yeah, great movie, I love it. This painting had a starring role in that movie, if you remember that. If you haven't seen the movie or if you don't remember it, I highly recommend it. You can probably get it on Netflix. It's in French, but there's subtitles and it's just adorable, and you'll get to see a lot of this painting.
We do have a comment from Elaine. She says she really likes the yogurt idea. She
Mhm.
always has it in the house, but she doesn't eat it often enough, and she knows that she doesn't get enough protein. So yogurt is a great idea. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Elaine. My suggestion, keep it front and center in the fridge. And Elaine, since I happen to know you live in Northborough, I don't know how close to a Wegmans the rest of you live. So this is for Elaine and anyone else who can get this. Wegmans has plain, non-fat, organic yogurt in a big tub. So for me, that checks all the boxes. There aren't too many organic yogurts. Listen, let's face it, your yogurt doesn't have to be organic, but it's nice. I like that extra touch, and it's plain, unsweetened, and on and on and on. They don't always have it. Sometimes they're out of it, and you can only find the vanilla or the full fat or something, but usually they have it. And I too am trying to be careful with my protein intake, so I'm relying on that particular yogurt, as I'm showing you a slide full of pastries. But again, I just want to make the point that everything's a matter of balance. We can enjoy pastries or whatever we like, but the French way is moderation. I have a feeling, I can't prove this, but I have a feeling that a lot of French people buying pastries like this would be buying them to share. These are big, but they're just so pretty. They're like looking at a painting. So also, we owe it to ourselves and the people we love to know and pursue our passions. We should all have passions. Maybe that's something we can work on during this time of, maybe being home more than usual. But we're happier and we'll take better care of ourselves if we know and pursue our passions, and will be more fun to be around. This is a map of Paris. And running through it kind of from west to east is the Seine River. And in the middle of the Seine River, there's these two islands right there where Notre Dame Cathedral is, and this other smaller island called Ile Saint-Louis. And on Ile Saint-Louis, which is a really small island, like you can walk all the little streets of it in a few minutes. On Ile Saint-Louis, here we go, is this ice cream place called Bertillon, and it's got a reputation of being the best ice cream in Paris. You can Google it. That's what people say, not just the ice cream place itself. So I was lucky enough to be going to Ile Saint-Louis several years ago in 2016. So when I read about this, I felt like I have to try this ice cream. How can you go there and not try the best ice cream in Paris? So I did twice. And two things about it, it really was that good. It was absolutely delicious. Just very, very vivid flavors. And also, and you probably know this is coming, the serving sizes were really small. So they use these little scoops. And I think I remember that the small is 1 scoop, the medium is 2 scoops, and the large is 3 scoops. But the scoops are tiny. So what I was struck by is that their large is smaller than our small over here in the US. So you know how when you go out for ice cream here, sometimes you might say a small and it's this giant thing. So their large is smaller. So really that is a big part of how they do it. French women walk. According to Giuliano, she writes that they don't go to gyms as much as American women do. That's another kind of American thing. Nothing wrong with going to a gym. that can be a great way to get your workout, but it's more common in France for people to just walk and walk and walk. It's good for health. And if you're not in the habit of walking or you feel like you're out of shape, you can start small and increase later as you go. So a few minutes ago, I showed you Monet's dining room. Here's Monet's kitchen. And I don't know if you can see on the very right, the opening in the doorway, and you can see that vivid yellow dining room. So look at this kitchen, equally beautiful, I think. And just what a pleasure that must have been to cook in. And look how shiny it is. Like, look at even the ceiling and the tabletop are shiny. I just love it. And I just think that we should all try to, fix up our cooking space and our eating space so that we love it too. I wanted to share this recipe with you for French style chicken. I found this in a different book on French cooking. And I loved, again, how easy it is. It just involves putting a chicken and some herbs and tomatoes and olive oil in a pot and cooking it until it's done. And I've tried it a few times now. It was extremely easy. I use dried herbs. I don't always have fresh herbs on hand. I like to, but I don't always. And it was really good. So I wanted to share that with you. And also baked peaches. This is a recipe I got when I was in France for baked peaches with whipped fresh cream. Was really good, very French. Here's a Monet called Jar of Peaches. This is so different than what we think of as a Monet, at least what I usually think of as a Monet. This was before, I guess, the Impressionist period really got going, or at least for him. He was pretty young when he painted this, but I think it's spectacular. Those peaches and that surface that they're on, it's just really breathtaking. So if you didn't set a goal already, when I talked about compensation, you might want to set a goal as something that I've discussed or something else you've thought of about a change you'd like to make in either the food you're eating or the manner in which you eat. And with that, I would like to say merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. I've loved talking to you, and I'm happy to address any comments or questions if there are any.
I would like to draw everyone's attention to the chat box. Before Elaine's comment, I pasted some links in there. One of them, the first one, is a survey. If you could just take that and give us your feedback for today's program. Your opinions about programming are really important to the library. I also pasted a link for our upcoming winter programs on nutrition and cooking, which of course include Judy and some chefs that we have doing virtual cooking shows for us on Zoom. The last link is a link to some other nutrition resources in a blog. We have a comment from Elaine. She says, thanks, Judy, great ideas.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you. I want to mention that my next class, I'm going to do, in addition to these classes, I'm going to do a 3-part diabetes series. So if you have or know anyone that has diabetes, the first class is this coming Thursday at 2:30 in the afternoon. And then there will be one in January and one in February. For anyone with diabetes or pre-diabetes, these are very prevalent. So I'm going to be talking about those.
If you want to click on the middle link that I put in there, that takes you to the calendar, and there are registration links for Judy's upcoming diabetes courses.
Thank you. And I hope everyone stays really healthy and has really good holidays. It's so nice to have you here, and it's a pleasure to talk to you.
Diane says, thank you for this wonderful presentation. I enjoyed your paintings.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I enjoy the paintings too.
Yeah, I'm so dazzled by Monet's kitchen. How did he get the ceiling shiny?
Right. I'm wondering, like, maybe when he was alive and people were in there cooking, I'm sure it wasn't him doing the cooking. Maybe it didn't look like that. Maybe it wasn't quite that clean. But I think that those are probably the colors. I think the staff at his home currently keeps it as it was. But when I got to tour it several years ago, one thing I wondered about is there's paintings all over the place. It turns out those are reproductions. So they're not putting the real paintings up on the walls. But anyway, it's a wonderful thing. And yes, the paintings are a great pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, I guess we're gonna wrap up. If anyone has any last comments or questions, we're just a couple minutes away here from 3:30. I have a water story I can tell about when I was in Paris. My
Yeah.
friend and I accidentally ordered bottled water, and it ended up being a $10 bottle of water.
Oh, nice. Nice. And you
Which
didn't
is
even know
pretty
you were
shocking.
ordering bottled water, huh?
No.
That's expensive. That's a lot of money. They do drink a lot of bottled water. Another really common thing. Yeah. Yes, $10 is a lot of money to spend on water. I agree. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I love seeing you and hope to see you soon.
Thanks, everyone. We hope to see you at our next nutrition programs, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Take care. Bye.